So, as far as the alien discussion, though, I mean, again, I want to just reiterate that the reason that I'm even bringing this up is because $21 trillion is truly enough to build a what Richard Dolan has called an off-planet civilization. Um, what like what is? I mean, obviously, it's all theoretical, um, but what do you think is going on as far as, are there multiple races? I mean, so let's just dive all the way in, right? So there's supposedly like insectoids and reptilians and grays. Like, what the fuck is really going on when it comes to these different species? And then there was the Majestic 12. There was a few other races. I think there was like 5 races in that Majestic 12 document that was heavily redacted but had gotten released.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
into that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's some pretty heavy level stuff. I mean, bottom line first, like obviously the big talk right now is David Fravor, this released naval footage, and people first believing, okay, they've acknowledged UFOs exist and are real, the Navy, all this, and then now people are still like arguing, is it just covert technology? And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be condescending, but like I've just looked at every argument and just none of it stands up to be like, you can't explain to me that this is some sophisticated drone that can go tens of thousands of miles an hour, blink in and out of points in space and time, and just literally disappear, not be on radar, jam radar, just like so many things where I'm just like, much love. I'm not trying to have confirmation bias here, but like that just doesn't hold up logically. And and a lot of people, I think, as part of it is just they don't want to identify or accept that this is real, because then they're like that weird alien guy. Like that's a big part of all this is like, and I had to do this too, is like the ridicule factor is a big part of the program, essentially, from going back to Roswell. They realized they had to ridicule people, use cinema and these things to make it seem less
Credible.
credible, and it works. I mean, it does. I mean, bottom line, it does work. And so, look at the results. So that's why the fact that the New York Times finally said it, so many people are like, oh well, the Times says it, now I can accept it. And I'm like, okay,
For 60 minutes,
fine,
right? Yeah.
fine. It's kind of weak, but whatever, I'll take it. And
But then there's the whole other side of, again, the word conspiracy can be polarizing, but this whole truther community or whatever you want to call us, there's those people that are saying, oh, well, if 60 Minutes and the New York
yeah,
Times and stuff, if they're talking
right.
about it, then there's some other deception at play
That's a
here.
good point. Look, I'm not trying to look. All right, look, I love the idea of a steel man argument versus a straw man is just your way to dismiss fucking people, and that's rude. Steel man, I think Brett Weinstein's somebody in the intellectual dark web coined it. It's, or whoever, but it's you hold up the person's best argument, right? And so like that is a strong point, but I think the reason they're doing this, the best logical answer I've come to is it is getting so overwhelming with the data and the evidence and the Navy footage and credible military pilots and people coming forward and getting on big platforms like Rogan, Lex Friedman, those kind of people. They're like, look, we got to just start controlling the narrative. This is getting overwhelming. We got to control the narrative. We got to create a space force, which Trump, whoever was in office, was going to get space force, in my opinion. And I worked with a guy who was an ex-Marine who was high up, and I was like, yeah, like these things don't happen overnight. This was years in planning, so it probably didn't matter who the president was at the time. And so they are setting us up to be like, yeah, okay, there might be some intelligent life out there. So now it's cool to say that we have this more space, higher tech stuff, slowly drip in these technologies and these things so that it seems like they haven't been lying and bullshitting us for all these years. Like they're doing whatever. This is called damage control, basically. They're trying to control the narrative, damage control, PR, 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 wag the tail. This is what they do and everything else. And I think, yeah, they're using 60 Minutes in those outlets because those are an extension of, look into Operation Mockingbird, of how they control the narrative. So that doesn't mean though, like for me, it's like, okay, fine, like they're gonna have to tell that. But like I also realize, like, especially with independent media and the internet now, like their ability to control a narrative is getting a lot worse, a lot more difficult.
And
So
Ben talks about this. I've heard him talk about like the paradox of, when you're in an argument with somebody, even a civil or a respectful argument, and you provide a source and they discredit the source immediately, but then you give them one of their sources, right? New York Times or 60
right,
Minutes, and it's like, well, you're using a source that you're
the in
against.
group,
Like, yeah, exactly. Because our side, if you want to put sides to it, we're the type that are very skeptical of the New York Times and 60 Minutes. So then when we hold the 60 Minutes interviews or New York Times up as this is here's your proof, well, then it's like, well, you're the one that said New York Times is incredible. You know what I mean? It's like you're fucking stuck in that paradox.
I find attend the hardest, but the best approach is to get them to think it's their own idea. This idea of inception. Because a lot of times I'm all about how do we get people to let their guard down? How do we get them to just like accept this? There's subtle ways to do it, maybe on a rooftop when people are more chill, you know, depending on the, like, once again, read your audience. That's a big part of this. But like, we are so ingrained, going back to our roots and looking at, you know, books like Sapiens. We are tribal creatures. This idea of in groups and out groups, look at social studies and these things. It's always been a thing for survival reasons, but now it's been exploited. And I'm kind of at the point, I'm like, fine, like, people are gonna be tribal, then like let's make our tribe like sort of like how I think Russell and other people like Rogan, especially like Russell, are approaching. Is like, then let's make our tribe like an extremely loving one that's educated, that's critical thinking, that's open to diverse thought. You know, like, that's the kind of tribe I want to be part of. If we're going to be so ingrained to our tribalism, then fine that. And then once we're in that tribe, then let's work on maybe like not being so tribal in general, or like, you know. But once you're in that tribe, I mean, if it's a very critical thinking tribe, then it's more of like a network. Then it's more of like independent. I love this idea of interdependence, right? So my idea is this is basically in a community of interdependent thought thinkers. I mean, and I think that's the next, get real heady, that's the next evolution for humanity and for any advanced species. I think we need to start getting to these points of really seeing the systemic design and these ways that we approach it in a much more just really understanding like what works and going purely based off that. And a key part of that is you have to have all the facts. You have to know really what's going on. You have to know what you have at your disposal to design the best system. And right now we're getting like 30-40% of the real supply, you know, whatever, I'm speculating here, but like, we're getting a very limited amount of what we can work with. And then it's, the design itself is not even being controlled, obviously, by the people who really have the best interests of the masses for the most part, right? So it's a combination of factors, but once you understand it, that's how you know, Sun Tzu, know thy enemy kind of thing. And I was sort of try to send him love, even to like dark artists like Cheney or somebody, but like, you got to know your enemy. So that's where like Ben and I really like, and that was something he and I really bonded over. I remember Gaia was like, some people were very rosy red glasses at Gaia, and just everything was like, I had one of my best buddies who I love, but he was very like, man, I don't want to even be around that negative energy or resonance, because it's just not even, I don't want to associate or have it around me. And I'm like, all right, like, he was very much the hermit approach, and just like, I'm like, that's fine, and that's your choice, and you can do that. And he really did, like, he was the hermit. He was beautiful at being the hermit. He was a very loving space if you were cool with him. But like, I was very much like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm gonna go into the dark, and I'm gonna rage against the machine in a very loving way, and like a love warrior. And Ben, you're fucking down too. You can sense that too. Like, we'll go front line on this, and to a degree, like, I'm also like, I want to live. You know, there's times where like, as things grow, like, how hard and pain on to go, and like, this has to be a leaderless, loving, nonviolent revolution. You know, it has to be based on you know, more ideology and design and spirituality and all the things that people, you know, hearing the same things for a reason. You know, I think there's bigger things at work. You know, you're hearing it in different words or perspectives, but it's all similar premises. Similar, you know, whether it's Brand saying it from a more spiritual angle, or Brogan saying it from a more sort of pragmatic angle, or Ben saying it from a more of, you know, mixture of both. Um, it's happening, you know, but there's no guarantees. You know, I do believe in free will, and you know, I think in every moment there's infinite possibility, but the probability of certain things happening, I think, are strengthened by certain actions and catalysts on your own and others. And you know, I won't even speculate on like the metaphysics of how the universe actually works. But I think ETs and all this stuff, man, like, I think they're on this level. I mean, they have to be, if you're looking at the tech they're using, or the craft and what the abilities it's showing. They understand the ability that all points in space and time are connected, and these craft are able to blink in and out of space and time, or phase in and out, shift, essentially density, vibration, frequency. As Nikolai Tesla pointed out, that's the key to understanding it all. These ETs have understood, in my opinion, these things to such an advanced degree that when they look at us, yeah, we look very probably primitive, barbaric, whatever term, but like, we're type 0 species, like, and our arrogance is overwhelming, though, so I think a lot of people just need to drop the arrogance and just say, hey, maybe we're not the smartest kids on the block, and it's a big freaking universe. Maybe somebody figured this out in the 3.4 billion years the universe has been alive ahead of us, and has the ability to jump across points in space and time in the universe a lot easier than using fossil fuels. I mean, to me, that when you really just start to break it down like that, it doesn't seem that radical. And I think the other big thing for a lot of people is like, okay, well, if they're here, bro, why aren't they landing on the White House? And why aren't they just like coming up and be like, what's up? We're here, peace. Like, once again, like if you're that advanced, in my opinion, and Dolan talks about this and others, like you would also be advanced in every other regard in your society if you're a benevolent species in particular. Philosophically, think about everything we do to like the nth degree. Not maybe everything. Like I think comedy and satire is something we really are fucking beautiful at. I think that's a unique human thing. Like I think there's some unique things to us for sure, but like when it comes to like raw tech, like yeah, we're probably super fucking primitive to these things that are made without any welds or seams. When you hear about the design and Lazar and others, like these things, like yeah, it's weldless, it's integrated with consciousness. It's just like yeah, it can fly tens of thousands. Like okay, well, like yeah, how close are we to doing that? Yeah, like so you extrapolate, you correlate. Well, if they're that advanced technologically, then other things might be, and at the same time, there might be some weird crudeness to them, like this idea the Greys are just basically pretty emotionless. They're not to get too weird, but like when experiencers talk about this, like they're talking telepathically, but they're saying like, why are you screaming? Why are you so freaked out? They don't understand for us why that's scary. And so they are just so like they're just that's a human thing to a certain degree, this idea of empathy. So like, and other ones, apparently other beings can be extremely empathetic, different, more advanced species apparently. So every species is unique and a culture, just like there's multiple cultures on this planet. There's going to be beautiful different cultures and uniqueness to every advanced species. It would just make sense, like they wouldn't be all cookie cut. Planet Earth isn't that way. Like why would it be different out there? So I think they probably make alliances and are smart about it, and they probably have some approach to primitive species. And now I know I'm sounding like a Star Trek episode, but like I don't think Gene Roddenberry was just talking out of his ass. I think whatever happened, downloads, or he knew somebody, whatever. But like, it, it is what it is. Like when and that's why I love that show and a lot of those types like Stargate. I'm really into right now because like I realize like from my research, a lot of this lines up, and these guys know some stuff. They're showing every episode of Stargate at Cheyenne Mountain in the bottom of it, where a lot of things have happened. So um, for me, I just think when you really start to look at these things deeply and honestly, um, I'm at a point now where I had to look at these things this seriously because I was afraid of the ridicule. Full stop. Like I was afraid of my friends starting to look at me weird. I used to be a lot more concerned about the opinions of others. And I said, you know what? Like this is too over. It got to a point, where it's just like, this is too overwhelming to not just say something's going on here. And then once I kind of just leaned into it and kept going more and more, I embraced it. And now I love it. And now like one of my friends, like now my friends know, like I'm the guy they can talk to if they start to like be like, hey man, like, so I just saw this New York Times thing and like, yeah, I wanted to rehash it. Like, it's pretty weird. Like, you're kind of right. Like, I'm like, all right, what else? Let's go, man. Welcome to the party, brother. Like, but like, yeah, like, so if you build it, they will come, I guess, that kind of thing.
Hell yeah. Yeah, definitely want to get more into the different species and like what as far as like the
Yeah, we
personality
can.
types. But a few things that you just touched on. One, movies. I feel like movies, Hollywood is genius at dripping truth out in ways that don't hit people too hard, like Wally, for example.
Wally.
But I mean, you can think of just
Yeah.
so many different
Well, a lot of
movies.
them, I mean, when it comes to ETs, a lot of them are very much negative, right? So 95% of most, Independence Day, blowing up the world, Alien, murdering you, like a lot of it, you think about it, yeah, it's all pretty negative. You get like ET, and you get like Close Encounters. You get like one or two, actually, some of the best ones, Spielberg, like incredible ones. But most of it's negative, and I think this is also part of the media operation when it comes to all this stuff. I mean, they talk about it in Majestic 12 is we have to create systems of discrediting this, from media to journalism to this. So it's laid out there. And then when you see it, it's like, well, that's just some crazy conspiracy. It's kind of weird how much it lines up with that. So, yeah, I mean, like that's part of what's Hollywood's role, just like part of the media is to get us into wars. It's part of it is to make us afraid of these things. I'm not naive. I think there are some negative, nasty guys out in the universe, but I think overwhelming the data is they're mostly benevolent. They're mostly positive. If it was a really nasty, authoritative, like badass one, they'd already, show up and just be murking and destroying the planet, right? What we're seeing is indirect content, brief encounters, blinks in and out. I had a really powerful physical encounter when I did a C5 in a group when I was working at Gaia, and that was one of the things that just like blew my mind when you actually have a craft powering up over you 3 times, going right over us. I hit it with the laser. Like those things, just like it changes the game. It takes it from theoretical to like I'm experiencing something that I know, like I know for sure what is an asteroid. I know all that. I'm like, this is a serious heavy duty sighting with a group of people that we helped initiate, and it was life changing, no doubt. And I had another one that was more kind of coincidental, but like that one was like, wow, because we helped initiate this. Like it was powerful. Um, and
You
yeah,
th-
I mean,
you think
yeah.
our governments or our whatever you want to call these gatekeepers, do you think they're like the do you think it's like psychological projection? Like they're the evil ones, so they project like their evil habits onto these aliens that are actually trying to help us? You think there's a little bit
I
of that
think I
going
think a
on?
lot of it's fear. Yeah, I think a lot of it is fear and paranoia. I think a lot of it is they don't understand it and they fear it. That's the sort of classic first fight for a lot of these military type minded people is fight, not flight. It's fight. Okay, there's a threat that's unknown. We got to fight it. And they made that decision early on because they felt if they told the American people that there was this threat that they had no way that was so more advanced and no way that not a threat, but you know their whole role, their whole identity would be crushed. They would feel useless. They'd feel it's like a man feeling infertile almost, to that point. Like they would feel so neutered, like, and that's how I think they still feel like it's to feel so helpless if these things wanted to attack us, because in their mind, there's probably more fear. Like at any point, we know how advanced they are. Clearly, like they could wipe us out, sir. Like there's so much fear and paranoia, I'm sure, around this, and I'm sure even if you don't feel that way, that's for malevolent people who want control and power, any sort of like hawkish type person, that's the angle, that's the narrative you're going to push within the deep state, and that's what you're going to associate with, and you're going to associate people in banking and finance and defense contracting and whatever arm you need to further your agenda. Metallurgy, chemistry, Battelle Memorial Laboratories, where they store most of these goods, Los Alamos, all these things are managed by Battelle. So like if you really understand how they do it and how they get around FOIA using private companies so they can't be FOIA requested. Like people are like, well, how do they keep it secret if it's so much going on? I'm like, let me explain it to you. And by the way, have you heard of the Manhattan Project? Over 40 to 70,000 people worked on that. Nobody knew about it till afterwards. Like compartmentalization actually is pretty fucking effective when it comes to national security. And when you hear leaks and stuff, when it comes to mainstream media, that's done on purpose to fit a narrative most of the time. A CNN analyst talked to a random, intelligence official. Like, oh wow, it just happens to line up so nice with getting us into another war. Like so people, part of it is though people don't want to believe that there's that much corruption and evil and people will stoop to that level. But like, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm much love, but like, does that justify us being naive to it?
I couldn't agree with you more on that point. Yeah.
But the types though, I mean, look, as far as personalities and like that would all be speculating from what Dolan talks about, like
Well, I want you to speculate a little bit. I want to hear a little bit of
Ugh.
that.
I mean, all right, like that's from like the more new age groups that I've maybe been involved with, and the more heady stuff of people who get into like Bashar or people who possibly have the ability to channel actual extraterrestrial entities. Um, because I honestly think that's the most fascinating to me. Like my dream in this life would be we do establish contact, and in some way I would get to somehow be a cultural or like diplomatic ambassador between our species. That would be like the ultimate dream in this life. If it doesn't happen, whatever. But like, I don't know. That's just being super open. But I honestly like there's grays, there's human looking groups like the Palladians. There are tall whites, which are taller white looking type gray like beings. There are what are calling like insectoids or praying mantis, which are beings that are very tall that look like a large praying mantis that most of these beings speak telepathically, except the human like groups. And this is all based on meta-analysis from Richard Dolan's book and others of thousands of experiencers talking about what they describe under deep hypnosis, along with military experts, people like Travis Walton, who have been on Rogan, who have very credible stories of missing time, serious police, looking into it, all these kind of things. So these aren't just your, Uncle Joe in the woods with one tooth being like, I had an alien abduct me. These are serious case studies. And no disrespect to them, not going to be mean, but like, I get it. Like part of this is like, you got to be, when you go hard, when you're talking about serious things, extravagant claims demand extravagant evidence. I get it. I believe it. This is an extravagant claim that there's extraterrestrial seers and there's different types, and I'm describing them. I get it. Like, this is me talking to your prefrontal cortex people. So, bottom line though, the insectoids, and then the last really heavy, gnarly one is that's true, which I don't want to admit is true, but reptilians. And David Icke's one of the first original people to talk about this group. Experiencers, Dolan, people I seriously respect, say, yeah, whether you like it or not, this group exists as well. And once again, I think we live in a big universe, and from what I've heard, all these groups have good and bad within them. Mostly certain groups are more benevolent, like Pleiadians and human-looking ones. Reptilians apparently are more cold-blooded, pun intended, I guess, whatever. But there are some good ones too within it, apparently. So it's a big universe. Bottom line is like, well, look, they're not invading already, so clearly the benevolent guys have more power and technology to be like, no, like you're not gonna come in and mess with this primitive species. So there's something holding back if that does exist and they wanted to currently. Or the other theory, which I think is also possibly going on, it's harder to prove, is they're doing it more covertly. So and this is what Eisenhower and people speculate on, is they have certain deep state actors, people who have access to this technology in the private and defense contracting sectors, and at one point in the government sector, like Eisenhower, made a deal with a certain group. The Greys was the group apparently he made a deal with, and we talked about it on the podcast and showed the evidence of the witness who was on the Air Force base when it happened, the photo of the guy who's seeing the craft landing, and the woman who's the daughter of him saying, "Yeah, he talked about it. Here's the photo." Eisenhower apparently got on this craft, had multiple meetings with the Greys, and basically said, "You are allowed to." What people have all talked about, people say abduct experiencers. There's different terms, but basically take people and study them for their own. They're basically having a survival issue, is apparently the word on the street.
So human experimentation to help out their own survival.
Yeah. And the really heady next level thing that certain like people who do like past life regressions will talk about is certain people actually made an agreement before they incarnated to agree to these certain experience. That's the next even headier level thing.
Experiments, yeah.
So bottom line is though, they if you are any species, self-preservation is critical. So for some reason though, apparently if there's some connection to us, this is more harder speculation, obviously. Then if they're connected to us somehow genetically, then that's why they use us, because it can help them because there's a certain genetic connection. So every group has a different agenda to a certain degree. It gets harder when you get into speculation. I would say to people, like, honestly, like the first thing, if you start to get more like, you've got like we said, like there's steps to all this, but like a really powerful thing is if you can have a CE5, if you can actually initiate an actual craft powering up or doing a serious powerful catalyst, like showing itself to you, that's really powerful. And that really then really, I think I would recommend that, because that's experiential, right? And a lot of what happens is people just read about or this, but like once you experience it, it does really change it for you. And man, like when it happens, it's weird. If something happens, like there's a connection. Like all people talk about this similar. Like you feel them. There's some connection, and if they have this advanced technology to basically like walkie-talkie your consciousness, basically, because once again, like, and I'm really big into consciousness. I think this is like the most important and cutting edge thing. And I love people like Adam Curry who have companies that study consciousness that are actually creating technology, integrating consciousness. So using quantum random number generators to do all these really cool things. But essentially, like, I understand people need to see proof of concept to believe. Not all people, but a lot of people seeing is believing. Like even whether you already believe it, like it will only add more confirmation. So regardless, it's going to do good to have something to show proof of concept, whether that's somebody embodying it, whether that's an actual experience, whether that's technology showing this. I think that's what they're doing. I think these beings this is part of the protocol for a primitive species, is indirect contact to certain degrees of different people to show like, hey, give you a little teaser. Here's a breadcrumb. Here's a breadcrumb. Here's a breadcrumb. Like, check us out. Like, start asking questions. Start really seriously considering this. Like, we're disarming your nukes and then we're rearming them. Like, they're
Yeah.
fucking with us because they want
Yeah.
us to wake up. Like, it's so obvious when you really are just like, dude, like, what are they doing this? Like, it's because they're like, wake up, silly. Like, come on, get it together. Like, stop being so arrogant and think you're the only ones here. Like, it's all a way to just kind of give us breadcrumbs to finally say like, oh, okay, and like and get people to maybe release some things. But my opinion, and the word is that the more we wake up, the more they can interact with us. And this is once again the Star Trek thing. That's why it's so bizarre, but I love it. Is like the prime directive. Like the more like if you mess with a primitive species before they're ready, they will maybe worship you like gods. It will hinder them more evolutionary than actually help them constructively. It's kind of like giving a man to a fish or teaching a man to fish.
Right.
So I think they're helping us teach ourselves to become self-responsible as a collective. But yeah, it's frustrating as hell sometimes. I'm like, come on, like I want to hang out, like I'm ready, like we just gotta like what's holding us back? Because you don't believe
Well,
this or this,
that's actually what I wanted to get into because a couple of things that we've touched on already. You mentioned like, obviously there's a better way to move around the universe than burning fossil fuels. So what is the connection between this, $30 trillion missing, off-planet civilization, free energy suppression, and then advanced technology? Let's bring those two factors into the conversation because I think that I think that that's part of the reason why they
Oh
haven't
yeah.
revealed themselves yet, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, as far as why it's not being disclosed by these what we call deep state actors, the people who have actual access, security, and material access to these things. This is probably the biggest thing is like the energy component because this is a trillion plus dollar industry. I mean, not only energy, but so many of the things they could bring us would make so many industries obsolete. It would probably crumble the entire monetary system, which is why I think it's, in my opinion, the most important thing in the world. Because if we get that, and I don't know how it happens, like a part of it is like, well, for that to happen, we have to get our shit together. So like, all right, well then like we got to get our shit together, because I want that's what's driving me most. Um, and and so
Access
uh,
to free energy,
no, well, access to ETs.
access to okay,
Way
gotcha.
in that, like, I want to fly around a spaceship, man. I want to go check out the planet, but I love Earth. But I want to hang out and say, come out, come hang out here. Like, I want to go to, Australia, Asia in the blink. Everyone would. I mean, come
Right,
on.
right, right.
Like, this is why we love sci-fi. We read, all these incredible sci-fi books, like, because it would be so freaking fun and dope. But you can't just get that until you're ready. Like, you got to earn that shit. Bottom line, like and that's where I think maybe things in the past messed up, or a certain species, if they get it too fast or they're messing with tech too ahead of their time, you can kill yourself, like AKA nuclear weapons. Like
You
that
think
is why
that's what happened with Atlantis?
well, that's the word, and the things I've read is basically Atlantis Lemuria is basically that we had access to tech that was too sophisticated. We had people who were using it that were similar to these kind of like military, hawk types here, and they were like, Drew Val Melchizedek, and people talk about this idea of the Merkaba, but basically they were messing with some seriously heavy duty stuff when it comes to technology that might have been, ripping points in space and time, and people start to draw parallels to CERN, and everything runs in cycles. And are we maybe, mini bang? How it's a mini Big Bang we're creating? Like, how big does it have to get to it to maybe start to get, Big Bang is? But
Yeah.
obviously these are tiny photons, and people, the quantum physics will be like, no, there's nothing dangerous. And so anyways, though, like I
But
think the energy.
that's ironic that they're the ones saying it's nothing dangerous when they should understand quantum entanglement more than anybody.
I don't think they really do. I mean, you talk to any real hardcore quantum physicist, they're like, dude, this shit's so spooky and weird. I don't really understand what's going on. Like, and that's why there's so much controversy within that whole field of thought is, it's string theory, it's this or this or this. They don't know. And that's why like experimental and practical physicists or mechanics will be like, yeah, those theoretical guys are so like annoying because it's just all theory. Like they want something hard to do an experiment. And that's why like CERN is interesting because it's this first experimental time to really, see if subatomic particles and all that. But energy, yeah, getting back to that, I mean, that is, I think, one of the most important things. Like, I think the bottom line is that, yeah, when you listen to people like Lazar or you see these different craft and what they're doing, it's clearly using some form of energy that allows them to not be affected by gravitational forces, allows them to go at extremely high speeds, allows them to blink in and out of space and time essentially, or just travel extremely fast. So I think different craft are showing different levels of advancement, but bottom line is they're all able to traverse a pretty large amount of the galaxy. And certain ones, have like a Tesla, and certain ones might have a Ford Model T in their, version. But the bottom line is like the first huge step for any species is having the ability to travel very large distances very easily. I mean, if we just keep staying and just trying to go to Mars and these things that are just like, that is so rudimentary that like we could be so ahead of this. I think we're being so limited, and I don't
I
know
mean,
like
we did
Elon
that
and these
50
guys.
years ago. I mean, look at how
Yeah,
much every other aspect of technology has advanced in that time frame.
right. I mean, you look at Elon and Branson and Bezos and all these guys getting into the space race in this private sector, but like they're still using, I think, the materials that they only have available at the public sector. I mean, when you look at people like Lockheed Martin, blank at his name, Skunkworks guys saying we now have the ability to take ET home. I do think there are covert operations, and I think that's a big part of where this money's going to develop, trying to create these new designs and systems. They're reverse engineering and trying to create it. I mean, why else not? I mean, it would make total sense if you're the general, you decide to suppress it after Roswell. You're saying, okay, find out everything you know about it, reverse engineer it, and then build me one of those because I want to be able to fight these guys. And I think also they don't know what the hell they're looking at. From everything Lazar and other people said, is like it's like dropping a nuclear weapon or a phone back 1,000 years ago. How would they handle that? They would just like. So for us, it's the same thing, and certain people are probably dying from it. All these strange stories come out of things in deep underground military bases between certain clashes where they're actually working with ETs and like. So like there's some weird stuff I think going on of like to a certain degree, like if the Eisenhower, and I think it did really happen from all the data I've done, like if that did really happen, we are exchanging technology to a certain degree, and that means there's some level of communication with them. Where it gets weird and fuzzy is like who's really in control of that tech, who's really in control of the narrative, how much are they listening to the advanced beings, are the beings working with one group that's good, or is another group a rogue group? Like you get into all these things, and that's where some people will then attach on to like certain whistleblowers in the space who I found you got to be careful because there are some people who will basically bullshit and makes things up to feed a more personal agenda. And so like this stuff is sci-fi becomes reality, but like that means there's going to be some people who are want to maybe going to take advantage of that sexy sensationalist narrative too.
Yeah.
So that's a part of this other whole part of the field.
Yeah. I definitely feel in this truth community that there's a lot of not even purposefully bad actors, but just people that for a lack of a better word, they're misguided.
They're narcissistic. I mean, to put it very bluntly, I worked with some of them at Gaia, and it's just like working with people and when I worked in Hollywood. Certain people, not everyone. I worked with some people I love, and I don't even want to name names here, but like you have characters that are some are very narcissistic, just like in Hollywood, and this is also an industry to a certain degree. I get it, but for me, I get the media component's important, but I'm also like, I guess you could say an ET activist, so I yeah, unfortunately, it is what it is. But some people will see an opportunity for their career, even if that means possibly losing credibility and shooting themselves in the foot in the process. Unfortunately, but it is what it is. That's their lesson they got to learn. Much love. Hopefully, they learn it. But just like CNN or somebody, they'll double down too if they're strong enough in their narcissism and I'm right, and so
Yeah. Convince yourself of your own lie, sort of thing.
yeah.
Have you ever heard the term extended intelligence?
Well, the closest thing I can think of to that is like morphic resonance, or like what Rupert Sheldrake talks about. This idea of like the collective intelligence and how like the 100 monkey effect, or like when one group of animals can learn something, then the other group across the world could learn it at the same time without having any connection. That's what comes to my mind close. I don't know if that's what that is defined as.
Well, that's a really interesting concept anyway. That's that 100th monkey effect, and like when an inventor invents something and then like an inventor on another continent invents the same thing like within a week without any shared information. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Extended intelligence is basically, it's almost like a hybridization of artificial intelligence and this whole alien, um,
Hmm.
extraterrestrial. You merge them together in the sense that, like, well, you see how much our technology has advanced since Roswell. So this is kind of the idea that technology itself, or artificial intelligence, is not actually artificial at all, and that it is that being. Because we personify everything, we anthropomorphize everything, and
Hmm.
like this technology is actually the UFO itself is the thing that's alive. Have
Right.
you
Oh,
have you heard of this idea?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
No,
the technology is actually
yeah.
controlling the
And
extraterrestrials.
for sure, that's a really cool, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is a really cool thing that I found in my research is that the craft itself has a consciousness essentially.
Right.
And so, I mean, this idea of general AI and stuff, I think that is possible. And I don't know if we've reached, I'm for sure, I don't think we've reached it yet, and maybe in covert areas, but we don't have general AI or this idea of like a self-aware AI. But I think it's half organic, half like self-aware technology. That's kind of what people describe. And once again, man, we live in a really big universe. There's probably stuff that's just, purely organic. That's a craft they use that they sync like an avatar riding a creature. They just sink in almost consciously. But I think there's some that's probably hybrid tech, hybrid organic, um, and and the craft itself develops a consciousness. It's kind of these ideas in Star Trek or any sci-fi of like, yeah, the ship becomes alive, and I think, look, man, everything is one, right? In my opinion, everything is energy. It's all it's never created or destroyed. Ultimately, it's just transferred. I think like it gets weird and heady when like you start thinking about like this idea of AI and like how are we going to approach it in the future, like the more intelligent and aware it gets, and the more it gets that level of general AI, like the more we have to start. I think the best way to approach it is treating it like a child, essentially like a new life form we're creating, and then be loving and good supporting parents and use it the right way. But like, um, right now, some parents are just some radically abusive, angry soccer dads or football, just like like they don't care, like, and it sounds super abstract and crazy to think like, what are you talking about? This is just a tool and this is deterministic. And I know people super heavy and heady in that AI and tech space that I've met and worked with, and like, yes, I think that's definitely true from when you look at it, but like when you really look into like how computer learning is working, and I was actually like helping a YouTuber tech guy like do his show, and like part of that I was just researching so much of this seriously heavy cutting edge machine learning, how it teaches itself using thousands, millions of simulations at once, and just like understanding like, oh my God, I get how it's exponentially growing, and how if it has this much food or data to use, it's going to grow fast. It's like a life form, like it's germinating. And the whole debate is like, is there singularity? Will it reach general AI? I mean, when you look into ETs in that space, like I think they've already kind of proven to a certain degree that maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm honestly, this is me coming to this realization now, but like that is probably pretty strongly possible. The evidence points towards that you can reach that general AI, have a craft that has it, and then sync with it. But I think that's part of what they're afraid of is like, this is serious power. Use it correctly. Create beautiful, loving, tech, quasi tech beings. Um, and then you can have some amazing, cool relationship and travel the universe with them. But like, don't create some Skynet shit that's going to kill you. So like, it's a tool. We're the creators, we're the fathers and mothers of it. But like, um, parent it well. I mean, that's just what's kind of coming to me. Like, so like, bottom line, like, I um I don't think these are I'm the surfer approach. These are big waves that are coming. We got to ride them and ride them the right way. It's inevitable. You can scream and shout, but like unless there's some sort of catalytic catastrophic thing, these things are happening. So like let's harness them, aikido them, and use them to the best we can as tools. And a big part of that is like, yeah, accountability and transparency, and calling out these people who are the mothers and fathers currently, the creators. Um, however that needs to happen, through regulation, open source coding, show us the code. I don't know exactly. It gets trickier, but I think like